get started, and of course everybody should be popping their questions into the chat as we go. But are you going to go through some of the last session video or not?
Yes,
the 360.
The 360-degree video. Yes, thank you, Ken. Cool. Perfect. So we had those two examples there, the left-hand side being the protected intersection and the right-hand side just a traditional with the hook turn facility on that leg there. Feel free to jot down any comments that you had about the two different arrangements and which ones you felt, how you felt cycling through both of them. Be interested to hear your thoughts. But today we are going to focus on roundabouts, and I should also just point out there's no Wallies in today's presentation either, so you won't have to be looking out for any of those signs today because we're going to have a different assignment after today's session. So no Wally.
No Wallies, okay.
All right, so today we're going to talk about protected roundabouts as well as multi-lane roundabouts and local roundabouts. And because this is such a detailed topic, there's actually individual guidance on just the issue of cycling and pedestrian trimmings at roundabouts. So this is one that Victoria produced, and there's another one that Austroads has produced, which is bicycle safety at roundabouts. And I think that really kind of showcases the importance of, you know, why this is such an issue, because they've got their own, you know, standalone documents that say this is what we should be doing within this space, because currently it is quite a risky area for cyclists. And those that do ride or, you know, have ridden in the past would probably know this anecdotally. It's can be quite daunting approaching a roundabout and, you know, getting that level of confidence that everyone's going to give way to you and people will see you and all of those kind of things, and particularly when exiting the roundabout. So yeah, it's definitely a big issue for cyclists, and the reason that we've dedicated an entire module to it today. So you might be asking, what on earth is a protected roundabout? I haven't heard that term before, and similar to our last session, we will just spend a bit of time in that one category. This would be considered, you know, the highest standard of level of safety you can provide for cyclists at a roundabout. So we'll go through what the design features look like there, look at some international examples, as well as Melbourne's protected roundabouts. So similar agenda to our last module. Then we'll hop into multi-lane roundabouts and things that we could do within that space. Those are very, very high risk areas for cyclists. So we'll pay a bit of attention there. And also the design guidance has changed over the years. So just want to refresh everyone to make sure that we're all on the same page, what to do within multi-lane roundabouts. And the final conversation for today's module will be regarding local roundabouts, which is kind of what you see on this paper here. So, you know, lower speed environment, lower traffic volumes. Generally, cyclists are encouraged to take the circulating area of the roundabout, but we'll talk about that in more detail later. Here we have an example of a protected roundabout. So this is like an artistic interpretation or impression of what one will look like. This one has now been built. This was the one that has been built in Melbourne in Victoria. But an important thing to note just at this stage, what's going on is you can see that the bicycle lane is being taken away from the actual circulating area where general traffic are. So cyclists aren't being told to, you know, take the circulating area or merge in with general traffic and then take your journey. Instead, they've got this off-road facility that's away from that space. And when vehicles do cross over, it's that same philosophy with the protected intersection where the cyclists are crossing in front of their line of sight, so right in front of their windscreen, improving that line of sight and slowing down vehicles as well with this raised feature at each of the crossing locations. I'll hop into more details. I just want to give you this quick snippet of what a protected roundabout looks like, but before we go into, all the intricate details of how to design something like this, we'll just get back into a little bit of the background, why we might think to be, investing in this and what's wrong with an existing, typical arrangement at a roundabouts. Well, in this diagram here, we can see we've got 3 cyclists, cyclist A, cyclist B, cyclist C as such. And those little windows, those triangles, they represent the line of sight for each of those motorists. And Ken, I might get you to launch a poll here, just to get participants' point of view. Oh, I might get it myself. Oh, yeah, we've got it all lined up there. So hopefully that's come up on your screen. Which cyclist is most at risk within this image? So we've got cyclist A on the left there, cyclist B near the splitter island, and cyclist C within the roundabout itself. So I'll give you a couple moments just to fill in that one there. And remember, this isn't marked or anything like that, so don't feel pressured. It's just, we'll see how you currently view this as a risk for particular users.
And what color cars do you see there, Max?
I see, so we've got a yellow car.
Yeah.
I'd call that purple.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
You happy with that purple? Yep, that's
Yeah.
red.
Yeah.
Blue.
Yeah.
Orange. Yes. Good.
We're happy. We had some challenges last one of the other courses on the colors of those cars. We're all in agreement today.
With
people-
yes. I put it on my note of things to work on. Color perception.
Yeah. All right. Good. We're getting some good answers coming in here, Max. Give it 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. An end poll, and I'm going to display the results. Most people are saying B. Some people were concerned with A as well.
All righty. No, that's good to see. No one's nominated for C, but that's all good. Thanks for sharing that, Ken. Might stop that so we get the screen back. Wonderful. Okay, I will just go through, I suppose, how I interpret this particular situation. So certainly cyclist B, as you can see, not really within anyone's direct line of sight. You can see it's kind of within 2 of the triangles. And the reason is because that purple vehicle is focused on that orange vehicle there. So that's where their attention is. And it means like the cyclist there, C, would be within the peripherals, but cyclist B is certainly getting caught out. And also the fact that this purple vehicle has already entered the roundabout. They're crossing over that give way hold line. They're certainly in a very dangerous situation. Cyclist C, they do have also a limited range to be able to see. The red vehicle you can see is looking towards orange, so it's likely they would be able to see them. However, purple would be more focused on orange as well, as I said before. So there's a chance that they could see C as a peripheral vision type of thing, but not necessarily that would be their focus. And poor old Cycle A, although they didn't get a mention in that poll, they are still probably at risk because this yellow vehicle is solely focused on what's going on ahead. And also, if this yellow vehicle see the purple vehicle heading into the roundabout, they're just going to assume everything's okay and I can head into the intersection or the roundabout, and that can also be an issue for cyclist A. So all of those answers are correct. All of those cyclists would, have some level of risk. I wouldn't really want to be any of them in this situation. And this is another instance of how a multi-lane roundabout can really affect the level of safety for cyclists. So just wanted to highlight in this particular example that, regardless of where you're placed, if you are within the circulating area, there are chances for sightline restrictions and other psychological factors going in as well. Because as I mentioned in a previous module, we are trained as drivers to look out for big, bulky motor vehicles. That's what we look left and right for. Even as pedestrians crossing roads, that's what we're looking left and right for. So our brain is trained to do that. And to be able to spot a cyclist who's obviously much more narrow, it requires more cognitive work. So there is lots of psychological aspects to this as well. If you are interested in it, you can Google it yourself and have a look and watch some videos on YouTube about that. But yeah, we do have a tendency whenever we're in these situations to actually look for vehicles, not necessarily looking for cyclists. So that's another aspect that just makes these interactions even more of a safety concern. If we look at the type of crashes or how those crashes are occurring within roundabouts, the most predominant type of crash occurring is an entering motorist versus a cyclist that is already within the roundabout. So just what we showed in that previous slide there, where there's already a cyclist that's in the circulating area, and motorists will enter that roundabout and they'll either fail to see them or they'll just enter and assume that they've got enough space, or for whatever reason. That seems to be the most common crash configuration that's occurring at roundabouts. The next most common is the side swipe within a roundabout. So that could be, if it's a multi-lane roundabout, vehicles changing lane within the circulating area or losing track of which lane they're supposed to be in and colliding with cyclists. This one in particular, exiting motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. I'm very surprised that it's actually only 9%, because if I was to look at this from a personal experience, perceptual level, that's where I feel most at risk. If I'm, cycling through a roundabout and I'm continuing through, and another vehicle behind me is trying to exit, that's generally where I feel the most nervous, and hope that they understand that I'm heading through and I'm not exiting at that leg. So it is interesting to see that statistic is such a low one, but this research is 8 years old, and it's possible that trends have changed, or maybe the data used for this was not recorded quite as precisely as they would have liked. So I'm not going to take that on face value. I'm just going to suggest that this is also a very significant risk for cyclists. In our module for VR 360-degree video, you'll actually get to experience how it feels crossing over one of those legs as a vehicle behind you is turning. So if you've never ridden that as a cyclist, this is a really good opportunity to see exactly how that feels like. It's quite nerve-wracking. So do encourage you to watch module 4 video, which I'll show you at the end of this session today. And the final kind of crash configuration that we have occurring at these roundabouts with cyclists crossing as pedestrians. So that can be further away across the leg there. And the reason is, as motorists are exiting the roundabout, that's when they're speeding up again, and they're basically not really anticipating to see any cyclists or pedestrians crossing if it's very, very close to that area there. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of background as to what the crash risks are and how they're occurring within roundabouts. And a really exceptional way to mitigate those risks is through the use of protected roundabouts. And for some, when they hear the protected roundabout term, they may be thinking of something such as this. This is called the Hovenring. This is in the Netherlands. And this is actually full grade separation between general traffic and cyclists. So cyclists and pedestrians, I should say, sorry. They are the only ones that are allowed up on this ring, and they can cross and go to any quadrant that they require, and they continue their journey, and they don't need to interact with any of this, major freeway arterial network below them. So although this is a lovely thing to implement, this isn't what is called a protected roundabout. I just wanted to show how beautiful this facility is. And if you do have, these kind of cycling numbers and, you know, trying to get them to cross over at grade would be a big challenge. That's not going to interrupt all of that traffic flow below you. So that's why in the Netherlands they've gone with this approach. So, you know, this is an awesome intervention and really world-class engineering there. But an actual protected intersection is on the same level as the carriageway. So we're not going to be looking at this kind of grade separation facility unless you've got hundreds of millions of dollars. We'll look at something that's a little bit slightly easier to construct. So we'll go through some design details now of how a protected roundabout works. And this is the same resource that we were looking at in our last module. So it is an international module in our international resource. So you may notice that there's slight design quirks that perhaps we wouldn't use, but that's okay. We can talk through them. The most important thing that you'll be able to spot is that there is a clear offset from where the bicycle lane is and the general traffic lane, as well as the circulating area and where cyclists are crossing. So there's this offset. And what that means is you're not forcing cyclists into the circulating area where we've already seen there's those sightline issues. There's the issues of vehicles, you know, exiting at a minor leg and not being able to see a cyclist or, you know, failing to judge the gap correctly. So instead, you're actually getting cyclists away from that area altogether and bringing them closer to the footpath and then crossing at a suitable location away. And there's a couple ways that you can actually arrange that crossing point. The preferred way would be to raise it up. So make general traffic slow down and assign the priority to pedestrians and cyclists crossing over there. So that's the preferred treatment, but I will go through some examples which doesn't quite do it that way. Let's have a look at some of these design features. So we've got number one here being the bicycle crossing. So that's its own separate feature, similar to the protected intersection. It's good to see two separate streams of vulnerable road users. So pedestrians on this side, cyclists on this side, rather than making them share that space. That's a very good solution. Number two, we've got these yield lines. That's that shark tooth line marking I mentioned last time, which is used in America and Europe. We would tend to use give way line marking. But this particular image is a little bit confusing because they've also got yield lines, which is number three. So hopefully you can see that there. And that means that cyclists actually need to stop as well. So it's kind of this confusing priority. Can you see number three there within the median as well that I'm circling? They've got shark teeth give way line marking there as well. So this particular figure is suggesting that vehicles need to prop and give way, and also cyclists crossing need to prop and give way. So this is a bit of a confusing arrangement. And in the real world, you would assign priority to one mode of transport or the other. You wouldn't do both, but this is just what's given in this particular guidance. Item number 4 is just this idea of a nice curb radius that's not too sharp and also not too shallow. So it's not going to be, you know, motorists are picking up too much speed as they're going through there. Number 5 is this channelizing island. I wouldn't necessarily worry about that one too much. We may not use it all that much within our jurisdictions, purely because it can also be a tripping hazard for pedestrians within that space, but that's what they've shown within this particular document. And the final is just obviously signage, just so everyone's aware of, you know, looking out for pedestrians and cyclists within this space. it'll make a lot more sense if we look at some examples. So I might just hop straight into an international one, which is, of course, in the Netherlands here. So here is an example of a protected intersection. And as you can see, if I was a cyclist heading from the top of the screen and I wanted to make a right turn in a clockwise direction, I'd be going down like this and across, staying on this red path the whole time, and across like this, and then continuing my journey like this. So at no point am I actually interacting with the circulating area of the roundabout, which is shown here, which is where the most significant risks are. So that's a big win. And the other really big win is where we are crossing over the general traffic's points, that crossing point there, because it's so far offset, it means that a vehicle exiting is going to have a much improved line of sight to be able to spot cyclists. And I can see a little comment in there, Ken, that's saying quicker to go the other way. And yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you picked up on that, because this is actually an example of a two-way protected roundabouts. I just thought I'd draw that in to start with, so we've got perspective, because they usually are one way, but yes, it would be much quicker to come along like this and up there. Good pickup. But what is not as clear within this particular example, it might be easy to show on the ground actually, is how the priority is communicated to motorists. Because as I said, it's much better from a design point of view and from a safety point of view if you are trying to keep continuity for cyclists crossing within this space. In other words, giving them the priority. And in order to do that, you would need to have kind of give way signage on that leg and that leg there. So motorists are aware that they need to stop and give way, which isn't apparent at this particular roundabout. But once again, it could just be that aspect of, well, there's the zebra line marking, so you know you're going to have to slow down there and give way, and perhaps they've just forgotten the signs at this particular location. But that's just one example of how these things work. And I think what really works well in this particular example, which I touched on before, but I'll just consolidate that thinking, is this massive offset is a big win. So trying to get that pushed further away is a very intelligent design choice. And what that actually means in practice is that is going to take up a significant portion of the land that you have available. Because you can see this is quite a large footprint. So it takes quite a bit of space available to be able to build something like this. And we'll go through a different example of what happens if we didn't have this land available. So our second example is once again in the Netherlands, but this is outside Rotterdam. And hopefully you can see, okay, buildings are a lot closer to our carriageway here, and there's not quite as much land to play with. You might have also noticed that the shape of the cycling path here has changed. It's no longer, going in and out and around corners. It's now also got a circular shape. So it's got the same shape as the circulating area for vehicles. So it's kind of like a donut almost. And while there are, this is considered a protected roundabout still, it doesn't quite have that same level of benefit where motorists are exiting to be able to see cyclists. And this actually aerial image is a perfect example, because if I show just the white vehicle that's shown exiting that minor leg there, as they're already entering that minor leg, this cyclist here traveling around here is at the back left of their vehicle. And as we've already discussed with protected intersections, very difficult to be able to see them. If this design had to offset that crossing point, so if the cyclist was instead coming around here and then crossing in that format, then when the car gets to this point here, the cyclist is crossing in front of them. So hopefully that clarifies the kind of difference that we saw within that first example. Having that greater offset does improve the sight line challenges that are faced if you've got things squished together too closely. And it's not to say that if you can't do one, then you can't do anything. Like this is still a better, this is still a better instance than having cyclists just riding within the carriageway, because there's also, it's difficult to see, but there's little separating channelized islands there to make sure that traffic are not leaning over into the cycle lane. So it's still providing that demarcation of this is where cyclists are, this is where general traffic is. But because you haven't got that significant offset, there is a slight increase of risk there about the sight line. And I'll give you an example of that sight line on the ground now. So, okay, this is a much better example where you can see it's, okay, I as a vehicle need to give way to pedestrians crossing there. And we would also include a little bike symbol in our jurisdictions, but that's a much better example. If we have a look, if we pretend like there's Ken's Porsche coming up to this roundabout, there we go. And we pretend that that Porsche is turning out and heading towards that minor leg there. And that cyclist is, you know, just wanting to get around this roundabout and continue their journey through there like that. Hopefully that's clear. If you could put your mind in the Porsche driver's kind of that driver's seat there, it'd be very difficult to be able to spot that cyclist. So you'd either have to, you know, slow down and wait as a driver and ensure that the coast was clear before you went through, or as a cyclist, you would have to just slow down and assume that that Porsche driver is not going to give way to me. So there still exists that risk of not being able to see each other and potential conflict. Just a question there from Caroline. Given cycling is more predominant there and that cyclists have right of way, would the risk be much reduced to what we have in New Zealand and Australia? I completely agree. Yeah. So that they're in, you know, the Netherlands and other very cycling centric countries and cities, you can kind of get away with these things because you are trained to just expect to see cyclists within this space. And I don't think it's the same level of risk in our jurisdictions because conversely, we are expected to see vehicles, just more traditional motor vehicles. So yes, I agree that the line of sight is still poor, regardless of which continent you're from. But I think culturally, we are just not, we're not at the same level of always being alert and aware that cyclists are going to be there. So it's a completely valid point. And that's why I just thought I'd show you, these are two different international examples. And in a second, we'll jump to how things are working a little bit closer to home, which is actually, I believe, the one that Sam has mentioned. I haven't clicked on your article there yet, Sam, but I'm assuming it's this one here, the Fendon Roam. There we go.
Yep.
It's
made I was gonna say, I think that Max shows this one coming up. So there you go.
Spoiler alert, it's made the presentation, and yeah, it did cop a bit of flack. There's no doubt about that. If you look at it from this bird's eye view, it is pretty confusing. There's lots of going on. There's lots of colors. But if you look at it kind of how we were thinking before about that offset and keeping cyclists away from the circulating area, if you see circulating area for the general traffic is in that red ring there, and I might use blue this time for cyclists. They also have the ring shape, but you can see it's not as tight as that previous example in the Netherlands because we still do have an offset. And that means, once again, as vehicles are exiting, cyclists are crossing more or less in front of them as opposed to their left-hand side of the vehicle. It's not, you know, perfectly aligned with the first example where you do have lots and lots of space to play with. So the further you can offset that, you would see benefits. But this is kind of a balance in between the first example we looked at and the second one, because you're getting some kind of benefit by providing this. It's also worth noting that where things get a little bit too close, actually I might bring it back to this slide here, where you don't have such a significant offset and that vehicle, say they are propped and waiting to exit, if they were waiting just a little bit back, you can see that there's now risk for rear end crashes for another vehicle in the circulating area to, you know, to not expect another vehicle to just have to pause there and give way to pedestrians and cyclists. So yeah, there's a little bit of an issue there, but I would just stress, if you're building these protected roundabouts for the safety of cyclists and pedestrians, so you're vulnerable road users, and for them, crashes at 30 kilometers per hour or above are a significant risk to them having a fatal or serious injury. If a collision like this with the rear end were to occur, it's incredibly unlikely that that would result in fatal or serious injury. So all I'm saying is I wouldn't let this design feature kind of deter you from saying that this project, you know, it can't go ahead because we may be increasing that risk there, or the risk of congestion. Because once again, if the objective of this project is the safety of cyclists and pedestrians in that area, then that may come at the cost of, you know, potentially congested roundabouts. Not to turn everyone off, hopefully, but just might stop there for a few questions. So
yeah, there's a few things to deal with. One's just your take on the amount of space these can take up.
Yeah, they can be pretty sizable depending on which option you go for. I suppose it's all dependent on what the adjacent land use is there, because it's unlikely you'll be, you know, buying up properties adjacent the road boundary. You just kind of want to work within the space that you've got. So yeah, it's all dependent on a site by site, what's there and what you can possibly do with it.
Next one's about optimal offset there, which you can see in that picture. It's got offset from circulating carriageway.
I mean, yeah, once again, this would depend on a site-by-site basis, but if you had a lot of vehicles that were, for instance, doing a movement like this and turning left out of there, say that that's the predominant movement, that's where you might want a bigger offset, because then you can actually allow for a queuing to occur that won't block the circulating area. So this, it's not like I can just say 15 meters should do it. You would need to work out, you know, what does traffic modeling show you? Is there a significant leg that has more demand? And that's the one that you probably want to treat with a greater offset. But generally, if you could get one propped vehicle there, and it's a low order, low volume road, I think that's a pretty big win for.
There's a TMR. TMR uses the 5 meter. I think there is a 5 meter rule, which is essentially a 1 car prop. As if you're doing that, but and yeah, I think Max's point's a really good one about dominant flows and thinking about that. But you've also got to think about too far off the line. If you push cyclists just too far out, it's
yeah,
less used. So it is case by case, but yeah, good stuff there. There's comments about potentially using raised tables, which I think you'll cover shortly, which is good. some commentary around the culture of writing and design and thinking about cycling in the Netherlands, and how we need to think about ours is those differences, which I think is good, and yeah, some commentary around costs and things like that, which you can get into. So keep going.
Wonderful. Awesome comments so far. Thanks very much. We'll have a look what this Fendon Road looks like on the ground. As you can see, this is probably a really good example of the driver there being able to see a cyclist as they're crossing and, you know, giving them adequate space to get through there. And you can see also cyclists have priority crossing over there. So makes for a much more comfortable and attractive ride if you're not having to continually stop and start across all of these legs. So very good example there in the UK. So that's Fendon Road in Cambridge, if you want to look that up later. We'll have a look at a video here, and this one actually shows a protected roundabout being utilised. I'm just going to have to change my pointer so I can click play. So here we go. Hopefully that's playing through at your end okay, but this is an example of a real protected roundabout being used, and you can see this is obviously on the right-hand side of the road in this country, in the Netherlands, but all the cyclists there being able to freely move quite comfortably, and all the vehicles, you know, fully acknowledging that they need to pause and give way at each of those legs. And also of note is just how comfortably all the pedestrians are crossing as well. This is a much more vulnerable road user safety focused outcome than how we traditionally design roundabouts. Ken, do you want to add anything to that video?
No, I was just saying it looks good, and we're seeing it stream through, and it's a wonderful little example of, it's just sort of peaceful, isn't it? Everybody just, they're moving through, and it's a great example.
Yeah. Oh, good question there from Cheston. When pedestrians cross bicycle lanes, who get priority? So this is one that I've been advocating a few times. You may have heard me say, well, look at this leg here, and maybe you can watch this pedestrian cross before the video ends, but it's not actually clear, is it? Who would give way to who? It just seems like a bit of a free-for-all, which is not a good design objective. You want to make things as clear as possible. So in a perfect world, I mean, the way that we would recommend doing things is continuing the zebra crossing across the bicycle lanes as well, just to ensure pedestrians have right of way, as they are generally more vulnerable than the cyclists, and cyclists can pause and give way to them as they cross over there. But really good pickup, and that is an example that we will show later exactly how to manage that. So we might hop into our Melbourne example actually. So this is very typical arrangement of how roundabouts are generally constructed for cyclist safety. So it's basically, you know, cyclists are pushed right to the outer edge of a roundabout and entering the circulating area, which is, as we've already discussed, not a great outcome. And what they decided to build here instead is a protected roundabout. And here's another even stranger shape. We've got an octagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, eight sides. We've got an octagon shape here. And this came as a little bit of backlash just with these sharp kind of corners or angles that you've got for cyclists there, because, you know, as you can imagine, cyclists like to ride in a nice smooth curve, or, you know, ideally in a straight alignment. So having these little jagged edges, some people dislike. So there was, you know, some community frustration with what was being delivered here doesn't meet cyclists' needs. However, what you have achieved in this design is you're getting cyclists away from the circulating area, which is a big win. And the really impressive feature in this example is all of the crossing points are raised. And this is so important because, well, there's a few reasons. A, it forces a motorist to have to slow down. So even if they don't see give way to pedestrians and give way to cyclists, if they miss all of that, visual cues, the fact that the carriageway has been raised as a speed hump or a raised table, that will slow down motorists, even if they're not paying attention. So that's a big tick, because one of the most significant things leading to, increasing the crash risk for cyclists is speed. So if we can bring the speed down at these conflict points, then we've done a very good job at reducing the severity of crashes and the risk of crashes. The other real benefit of having these raised tables is, as cyclists are elevated, they're in a more prominent position. And so it actually becomes easier to see them as they're crossing as well. So there's an increased visual awareness that pedestrians and cyclists are crossing. Ken, did you want to jump in there with something?
I was a question from Justin, where is this octagon roundabout in Melbourne? And Carolyn was also, just impressive in terms of road space and footprint in those, and how to squeeze and fit these in.
Yeah, so this is in Moray Streets in South Melbourne, and it was part of a bigger project which is discussed in the module for VR 360-degree video. So I won't talk about the exact project and how this came about and its history, just because that is discussed in the video, so I don't want to have to repeat myself. But there was a deliberate reason why this was installed, and it makes sense from a strategic point of view why this intersection was considered for this level of investment. So you'll get all those answers in the video. But yeah, Moray Street in South Melbourne, there's two of them on the same corridor.
And
sorry, Ken.
There's just a little question in here around sort of road reserve and dimensions and space needed, but we'll keep going because there's a bit more to that, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So I mentioned those two benefits there to raising it. So you've got lower vehicle speeds, regardless if they don't see the crossing point, the raised feature is going to slow them down. Increased visual awareness, because pedestrians and cyclists are on a higher level, it's easier to spot them. And the third benefit that I thought I'd mention is just, you no longer have cyclists kind of having to go up and down onto the carriageway. Like it's all one level for them as they're crossing over. So they go up, if I'm at the bottom here, I'm going up onto footpath level, and then I'm staying on footpath level, staying on footpath level, staying on footpath level, and then down onto the carriageway, as opposed to going up, down, up, down, up, down. And although that may seem a little bit trivial, it means that you don't have those changes in speeds, those bumps. Whenever you do have changes in levels as well, you have curb and channel, and that means change in grade, which also impacts the attractiveness of a route, because if it's too steep or it's the ramp grades are not correctly constructed, or there's just an inappropriate profile there, all of those factors can lead to cyclists not wanting to ride in that environment. But I've talked about all the pros of this intersection or this roundabout. I'd be interested if anyone could pick up on any disadvantages of this type of roundabout for cyclists. So I have been very positive. I was interested if anyone could think of any disadvantages with general traffic for cyclists. I'll give you a moment to ponder that. Can anyone think of any disadvantages for cyclists?
So we're seeing the conflict when rejoining traffic, distance to do that right turn, just the one-way aspect of this one, conflict with Angled parking a little bit on the approaches there. Bit of discontinuity on the western leg for
Yes.
bicycles in terms of facilities. Not really wide enough to support more than, well, one or two few cyclists.
All really valid points. Yeah. So the angled parking, I think that's an excellent pickup. Really an unsafe parking arrangement adjacent cycling corridors, purely because as they're backing out, you generally don't have a good line of sight, particularly if there's multiple backing out angled vehicles there. You're just kind of backing out until you hear someone bip at you. And if it's a bicycle bell, you may not hear that. Or if cyclists don't have a bell, you also may not hear that. So angled parking is regularly nominated as a fairly high risk for cyclists. But it's not the one I was actually thinking of. The one that I was thinking of, and I agree with, is that right turn is more circuitous. In other words, it's lengthier as opposed to just heading straight into the middle there and doing that. So I might give a prize out there, Ken, for the person that mentioned that. All of those were fantastic examples, though. There's nothing against anything there. That was the one that I had in my mind.
Okay.
And, oh, sorry, Ken.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yep, roger that. I'll find who it was and give the prize out.
Wonderful. However, while that may be viewed as a disadvantage, and during the consultation phase, that did come up as, well, this is going to be used. Cyclists aren't going to do that. That's crazy. Of course, they're going to take the shortest option. I think we need to take a step back and just really think about what this project is trying to achieve, which is once again the safety for vulnerable road users, for pedestrians and cyclists. We know that there is a risk if we put cyclists in the circulating area. So we already know that due to the sign line requirements. So we can provide things that are further offset, which we've done here with a protected roundabout. We've raised up the legs. We've given priority to cyclists across all the legs. We've given them a nice smooth surface to travel across. If cyclists choose the shortest route for them, they can still make that decision. So we have seen cyclists using the facility, just as general traffic would. And you can also see this fellow hasn't got a helmet either, which is a legal requirement here in Victoria. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that means this project has failed its objectives, because cyclists that choose this as an option will likely choose this as an option regardless of what you put there. Same with if you build shared paths adjacent an 80km/h road, which has an on-road bicycle lane, some cyclists will still choose to use the on-road cycling facility adjacent high-speed traffic. So there's always going to be, a range of cyclists, confidence levels and what they deem as personal risk. But it's important to reflect on, well, if we are interested in getting a greater suite of cyclists interested, engaged, feeling safe on their bikes, going through roundabouts, then we need to provide more facilities like this. So just trying to highlight that even if this does occur, which it will, it's not a reflection on the project's ability of achieving its objectives. Got a question there. Is there any Strava heat map data to see what cyclists are actually doing here? And we actually completed an evaluation, Safe System Solutions, of the exact movements and exactly how this roundabout was being used by cyclists. I don't have, actually I do, I might have the figures in front of me. Yeah, cyclists using, that was very convenient. Cyclists using bicycle lane heading through was about 91%. So 91% chose to go around and do that. kind of on the off-road. Using the protected bicycle facility was about 91%. Doing the right-hand turn, that got down to about 77%. So about 1 in 4 decided to do what this person is doing there and turning right using the carriageway there. So hopefully that gives you a bit of perspective. It's those kind of figures. So it's not 50-50 or anything like that, but it is still, you will see cyclists doing that. See if I missed any more questions there. Could you also add sharrows to allow more confident riders? I would suggest if you're adding sharrows, then you are perhaps subconsciously encouraging that movement, which you may not want. I would still suggest you would encourage cyclists to be using the protected facility and just acknowledge that cyclists may use the circulating area. I wouldn't really suggest that you encourage both, either one or the other. And if I had to pick one, I'd pick the protected. So it's not an unreasonable suggestion though. And actually on the next slide, we can have a look how that exactly is managed. Just from Sam, I completely agree. I find it is frustrating that some identify this as a failure. We spend all this money, they don't even use it. Yep, no, bang on. I completely agree. It's a very common rhetoric, and it's not an indication of failure. It's what we can look at is, are we getting safer, crash statistics through there? Hopefully we're seeing reductions in those types of results. And also hopefully we're getting an increase in the actual uptake of cycling through those areas. Again.
I was just going to agree with that comment about there's such a variety of cyclists, people who ride bikes out there that, if we're getting 77% doing that and the others not, what are we really focusing on there? So good, well done.
So here's how things look on the ground approaching the roundabout, the protected roundabout, and this is 2 different legs. And you'll see that cyclists are not actually being forced, to enter this space here. There's a pavement symbol with an arrow saying use bike lane at roundabout. If you're able to read that, if you're cycling at high speeds, that's a pretty good effort. But you can see, it's not particularly the circulating area. So once again, that does come down to cyclist judgment and, picking what they feel is most appropriate or safest at that time. If you did want to exclusively promote the protected bike roundabout, what you could do is you could extend those separator islands all the way up there. And so in other words, there's no gap for a cyclist to enter the lane there to then enter the circulating area. You're actually forcing them into the protected roundabout. So there may be a reason that you do want to achieve that. Perhaps you're concerned if a cyclist enters here and then a car can't see as they're approaching the roundabout, they can't see each other because there's lots of parked cars here. That may be a valid reason to actually force cyclists into the protected roundabout area. But just thought I'd show you those 2 different approaches at the same roundabout, and they both have different ways of kind of dealing with that conflict. Just from Sam there, it'd be interesting to profile what riders are using in the past. Are we seeing a different demographic afterwards? Good question. This is a route into the CBD and into the South Bank area of Melbourne. So you would expect lots of commuters. But yeah, I would expect quite a wide range of demographic there. I can't tell you at the top of my head, but there's certainly been studies done on this. So I'm sure we could get some more info there for you, Sam. Okay, so we've talked about protected roundabouts, and we will move on to the next topic, which is multi-lane roundabouts. And let's just have a look at what's going on here. This is a high-speed environment. Get that one out of the way. And I'm going to look at the bottom right-hand side of this roundabout. You can see this is actually an off-road cyclist facility. It's very, very close, obviously, as you can see, to the carriageway, but at least it's protected by a curb and channel, so you're raised up a little bit higher. But interestingly, what happens is as you get to this point here, you'll ramp down onto the carriageway. So you're no longer raised up and protected by a curb and channel. You're now at the same level as general traffic. As we continue a little bit further along, what you may notice is the width of our cyclist facility is tapering down, which is not great. So you're getting squished into the very, very edge of the carriageway, very much into the curb and channel now. And you're expected to ride into this little narrow area here. And it comes back up here onto a raised section. And you can pause and wait there. I don't believe there's any actual pram ramp that would permit this. No, there isn't, sorry. So if you wanted to turn right here, you would be forced actually to go around like that because there's no pram ramp there. And there's also a sign there that would probably stop you from pausing there. Hopefully everyone can see the risk there. If you were a vehicle and you were just traveling through and perhaps you did notice that there's a cyclist there, but you're just assuming that they're going to be turning left, you would very confidently just be driving through there or driving through that leg there. And you've got these two really significant conflict points. As I mentioned, this is 100 km/h speed zone. So traveling through there, you're probably at 60, 70 km/h because of the large radius of this roundabout, which means it is most likely going to result in a fatal accident if there was that collision occurring there. So this is not a good example of what to do at multi-lane roundabouts. I'll show you what this looks like on the ground there. So you can see that narrowing effect of what's happening at the bicycle lane a little bit more clearly. You can see that's just getting narrower and narrower, and cyclists getting pushed right to the edge of the curb to travel around. Very uncomfortable to be in. You also may have noticed that there's some signals there. That's got nothing to do with the cyclists, unfortunately. There's a boom gate there on the side because there's a level rail crossing there. So when that boom gates go down, those lights go on just to let you know you've got to stop there. But nothing to do with the cyclists, just in case you were wondering. Not a good example of what to be doing in multi-lane roundabouts. So, and if you look at the Strava heat map, cyclists do use this facility. This is not like it's in a rural, unused area. This is just outside a very major town, and it is used by commuters and recreational cyclists. So it's a very poor outcome as it currently stands. We've got another example of a multi-lane roundabout. This one's in Canberra. It's a different speed zone. It's 60 km/h. However, you can tell by the general arrangement, it looks very similar, which is why we've chosen this as a comparison. So we'll have a look and we'll see how cyclist safety is managed in this example. So we had an on-road facility, once again, on the bottom right-hand corner. And as a cyclist, you actually get taken off-road. So similar to the previous example, but there's a little bit more of a buffer in between the carriageway and that cyclist facility. Then we get taken away from the roundabout. At this location here, there's a little hold rail, which is, a point for cyclists to pause and give way and actually physically hold the rail. And it's really useful for cyclists that use little clip-on shoes for their bike because they can be difficult to clip in and out of and can be difficult to just pause on your bike. So having a hold rail there makes things a lot easier. They pause and give way, and then they cross over like this, and they can do the same at this location. At this location here, pause, cross, and give way when it's safe to do so. You can even wait there within the median, so you can separate your movements there and then cross over. This is a much better design outcome because you've got that offset that we previously talked about with the protected roundabout. But what's different as opposed to the protected roundabout is priority is still to the general traffic. And I think that's important to note. In lots of local areas and areas where you've got significant cycling traffic volumes and where you're expecting to see high numbers of cyclists, it makes sense to prioritize their movements. In instances where it's a bit more remote, you may be getting 10 or less cyclists per day using this facility. And the road is, an arterial or it has a highway function, and the movement of general traffic would be considered the priority. That's when you can instead say, cyclists, you need to pause here and give way because the priority is given to general traffic through here. And I think that's particularly important at multi-lane roundabouts because it's such a significant risk for cyclists. If they just assume that they have priority through here and just cycle through, it's a good idea to say, no, you need to stop, pause, look left and right, or just right in this instance, and then cross over when it's safe to do so. Have a look how this one looks like on the ground. So this is obviously approaching the roundabout. That was the ramp up to there. And what would have happened previously is the cyclist would have just been forced to kind of be right there amongst it, which is not a good outcome. So much prefer this type of design. The reason we had that first example is likely taken from this document here, Austroads Guide to Road Design 4B 2011, which has been superseded. So this design was the one that we saw in the first example. However, it's no longer within the Austroads Guide. So that has been taken out with the very intention of we don't want to see more of these being installed because they present such a risk for cyclists who are going to be turning right across there, or even left turning motorists crossing over cyclist paths there. So this is no longer in the Austroads Guide. For those that have seen it, I suppose it's time to forget it and move on, and we'll see what we can do instead within this space. And here's something that would be considered more appropriate for multi-lane roundabouts. So you'll see it's off-road like this, and you'll also see it's that offset that we talked about. So it's not right up against the circulating area. There's sufficient width there for at least one car to prop and wait and give way. Importantly, what is shown in this particular plan view is, you may have noticed on this kind of east-west of the roundabout, on those what look like major legs of the roundabout, they look like a freeway because it's multi-lane. Cyclists need to pause and give way there. You can see there's no give way line marking or there's no zebra crossing or anything like that. That's, strategically being suggested that this is more important, that general traffic have right of way in these instances and their movement is more important. However, if we look at the north and south connections on this particular example, you can see that's been flipped. So this could be, in a real world, this could actually be a cyclist lane, that it's adjacent a freeway and it crosses over a small local road that just connects to a certain number of properties or farmland or something like that. So quite a minor leg. On the minor leg, you can make a decision to say, well, there's really such a low volume of traffic that uses that minor leg, and we can safely raise up that facility there because we already know that minor leg would likely be traveling at lower speeds, being aware that they're approaching a freeway. And in that instance, well, we will raise the facility, we'll give priority to pedestrians and cyclists crossing there, and we'll make cyclists and we'll make general traffic give way. So it's that bit of strategic thinking about exactly what that crossing facility would look like and how that will be managed, and ensuring that the priority is clear. Just a question there, Ken?
I was just a point around the potential challenges of crossing that main leg at peak times.
Yeah.
I think this it's an interesting one. It'd be good to have underpasses at those spots, wouldn't it? Nice.
Yeah.
That's sure if that was in the Netherlands, that would be underpasses.
Sam's picked up on if this guidance really uses the term mammal.
Where?
You haven't said that?
Where?
Raised crossing with priority given to mammals.
Yeah. So that's one of our designers. That's Reese for sure. Writing mammal, and he did it in another one where there was this idea of providing this little pocket in the turn area, where sort of at about like 2 o'clock on the roundabout. A little pocket, and he was designing up a few of those, and he called them the mammal pouch. Anyway.
Fantastic. Yeah, our colleague Reese likes to see how much you can push the boundary before anyone notices, which is credit to him. So no, this hasn't been formally adopted by Austroads. This was a concept.
The TMRs put something similar into some of their guidance as
that's true.
Something to think about.
I think I might have just missed a few there. So just Cheston is asking if a separated bike lane and paired crossing is better or a shared path. I would suggest separating the two tends to be a better outcome just because of the speed differential. You can have a high speeding cyclist burst, a parent with a pram. So separating those two users tends to be a better outcome. Generally depends on the space that you've got available, and a lot of the time just a 3 meter shared path facility is provided across there. But good question. Is it not potentially dangerous for traffic to be stopping going north-south and bunching up, then stopping the fast 2 lanes? Once again, that's a pretty valid argument. But in this example, we've just suggested that this minor leg would have low traffic volumes. So the odds of that queuing effect would be minimal. And also given that it's also probably low volumes for pedestrians and cyclists crossing there. So at a conceptual level, it's just a matter of, trying to do some traffic engineering modeling around exactly what you'd expect to be seeing turning across there and how many people you'd expect to be crossing over there and the likelihood of that queuing effect occurring. Something that would need to get considered though. I'll move on to local roundabouts, and it is the final time we'll get stuck into this, my favorite time of the presentation, but asking what's wrong with this photo here. Bonus points if you can tell me where it is. I'd be surprised. We don't actually have any participants from this location today, Ken.
But a few might have holidayed there. Lovely part of the world.
That's true. Anyone, any comments on what's wrong with this photo, or if anyone knows where this photo was taken? I was actually, I was there a couple months ago, Ken, and I was actually staying at an Airbnb about 60 meters away from that roundabout.
There you go.
I actually deliberately chose that so I could see this roundabout.
you could go there. Cole's in the general vicinity with Hobart. He's in the right state, at least.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to some issues we've got here. How's a cyclist supposed to get on the curb if we're trying to push them off, if that's what the intention was? The bad merge. Cheston's guessed Launceston then, and is a winner.
It is Launceston, correct.
Designer gave up at the intersection, didn't have the guide.
That's good.
So a lot of people on that determination. That's about it.
That's spot on. I might just keep going, Ken. I've got a bit more to cover and I'll get through the assignment as well. So, but but yes, that feedback there of just the bicycle lane ending and then there's just a free for all, just not really sure what cyclists are meant to do. Do they mount the curb or do they go up and go into the traffic lane? Unfortunately, this is a very common arrangement, particularly in local roundabouts where it is just end it and hope the cyclists wish them all the best on their merry way. For those interested, this is Elephant Road, Brisbane Street, Lawrence Street in Launceston. It's called the Peanut Roundabout, as it's shaped like a peanut, coincidentally. But what you can do to better improve this type of arrangement is providing sharrows once again, communicating both to motorists and to cyclists that, okay, the cycle lane doesn't just end, instead the cycle lane is being transferred and it's going to be merging in with the general traffic lane. So you're now sharing everything there. So we've already spoken about the sharrows, so I won't get too much into detail, but generally the sharrows are a preferred treatment within local roundabouts. So you're not going to be able to fit a protected roundabout in this space here. So instead, getting cyclists right in the front there, making it very obvious that they share the traffic lane and getting them in the middle of the circulating area in local environments, it can work quite well. So no issues there. What I would suggest though, if you are implementing any of these within any of your jurisdictions, they've done well here to implement a speed hump, to vertical deflection to ensure that vehicles are slowing down before they approach the roundabout. It would have been even more impressive if they had have moved this feature before cyclists are first forced to merge, because then you'd have general traffic slowing down before the conflict point occurs. So they'd already have to slow down and then slow down going through the roundabout. So just that little design tweak could have made that feature work even safer. And it is something that we are starting to see an improved uptake in. Here's just another example of how local roundabout is being managed. So once again, not quite a sharrow, but just a little arrow there saying cyclists take prime position. And once again, with that speed hump, if we had to push that back further here before that merge point, it just would have been a better outcome there for cyclists. But very, very common to see that type of arrangement in local roundabouts. I did allow a little bit of extra time to go through some, not quite cycle infrastructure, but just some great adverts and marketing campaigns that I've come across over the years. So this one out in California, look out for cyclists, obviously paints quite a graphic picture. This one you might have heard of. It was quite a trend a couple of years ago, the Red Cup project. Basically, people all over the world started putting these red cups on their bicycle lanes right at the edge. And the idea was you do it and then you come back an hour or so later and you see what's happened to your red cups. And inevitably this happens across the world. So Australia and New Zealand had examples of this, of the Red Cup project. So you can follow that hashtag if you are interested on Twitter, just to show how vulnerable cyclists are and how regular it is for cyclists, for the cups to get crushed. Question there, cups get blown over. Some do, but these ones are getting crushed, certainly. Some people also decided to put tomatoes or apples inside them to once again show that, yeah, this space is not being exclusively for bicycles. It's being encroached quite regularly. Could the cups be a trip hazard? You're pretty likely just to kick over the cup. I'm not sure it's going to cause you too much damage, but who knows? But this one's my favorite. I love this one. This was a bloke in New York who just got fed up of not having a protected bicycle lane on his way to work. So he just went to his local hardware store and bought 50 plungers and then just started gluing them down himself and just built his own. So credit to him. He gave it a go. Unfortunately, it didn't last, and Cancel did rip up all this, all of his artwork, all of his hard work. But yeah, just interesting to see how passionate the community can get about their cycle facilities. And if it's not up to scratch, they'll certainly let you know. There's one more ad here. This one was in Scotland. So I'd encourage you just to click on that when you get the chance. It's just a short ad to explain why, if you see a cyclist, you should be thinking horse. But interestingly, this only lasted about 6 months or so. I used to live in Scotland, and I remember seeing this, and then it just ended abruptly. And the reason is because people were complaining that she's not wearing a helmet, which is not actually a requirement in the UK, but people just didn't like that. And also she was cycling too far away from the gutter there. So people just, were furious that they had to watch this ad over and over, and it just got basically pulled from the viewing. Ken?
No, I was just getting ready to discuss the exciting 360 footage and
Yeah, great.
and everything else.
This is the next one that you will be viewing. So there's going to be that example there of the protected roundabout, and then also a traditional roundabout as well, where you'll be turning right and another vehicle will be behind you going through. So make sure you've got your towel there, because you'll be dripping off the sweat there for sure. Ken, I'll hand over to you if you like.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the completion of the course is coming up. So you do have a little assignment to do, which Max, are you going to take people through?
Yeah, I am. Is my screen still on there? Sorry, Ken. On the elements?
Yeah, can see you're in the learning management system there, Max.
Thank you very much. So the 360-degree video, as we just touched on there, click on the link. That will take it to you. This one's a little bit longer. It's 9 minutes, because there's a little surprise at the end there. So I encourage you to watch it all the way through, because it's worth seeing. Yes, the whole extent of the video there. Mm-hmm. But you'll see we've got module 4 assignment. So we've got no quiz, there's no Wally, but instead we have this document here, which I've already got open up. So I'll just open up this. Similar to our last assignment, we've just brought it down into steps to make it as easy to comprehend and digest as possible. But we basically want all the participants to select a site that has existing cycling facilities. So you can pick any site that you want. It can be near your house, near your work, near where you pick up the kids from school. You pick whatever suits you. And it can be any cycling facility. It can be an off-road path. It could be an on-road that approaches an intersection, or a local roundabout, anything at all. We actually want you to go out and visit the site. Okay, we want you to see, try and get in the mind of a cyclist traveling through there. You don't actually have to ride your bike through the site, but you're encouraged if you want to. If you have a bike and you feel comfortable doing that, then please go for it. But we do want you to inspect the site. Please do so safely. We don't want you to inspect any high-speed roads or anything near freeways or anything like that. We want you to just be in a safe position at all times. If you can get a photo of yourself out there on site, take a selfie. That's always fantastic. We love to see that. And then we've got 3 very high-level questions that are going to test just how well you've learned the content that we've covered. So it's fairly self-explanatory, but I think the most important, an interesting thing to note about this particular assignment is this step 4, is that we encourage you to present your answers however you want, whichever format that suits you. So you can make a video, you can do a PowerPoint presentation, you can just do a simple Word document. Here's the questions, here's my answer, no problem whatsoever. We've found in the past that participants, some just love to get creative. We've had people write poems, we've had people write songs, we've had people do like detailed designs like in MicroStation and CAD, and they enjoy, getting some degree of creativity out of this assignment, which is why we just encourage, we would like to see whichever format suits you the best. so long as we get the answers that kind of match up with what we need to assess. So please go crazy. We had a comic as well. That was fantastic, very entertaining. So what are the questions? Very high level, as I mentioned. So the first question is, what infrastructure currently exists? And that is cycling infrastructure, just to confirm. So you'll need to go back and revisit just to see what terminology you would use to describe that facility, and you can mention that. Question number 2, this is perhaps more pertinent, and this is where you'd have more information, but what are the hazards for cyclists? So we don't want it to just be as catch-all as vehicles, motor vehicles. What are the specific hazards? What increases the risk of a vehicle and a cyclist colliding? Is it the speeds? Is it the sight lines? Are there other obstructions or distractions within that space that make that an increased risk? So if you could get some detail in that space, that's will ensure you get top marks in there. And the final question, we want you to get your designer hat on and to think what could be installed to better improve safety for cyclists. And it's going to be a similar vein to assignment 2, or the first assignment that we did, which is we want you to be pragmatically thinking about these issues. It's not going to be as easy as let's just grade separate a local roundabout where you've got local streets and residents and it's a very narrow carriageway and things like that, because that's wouldn't be a feasible solution. Instead, we ask for pragmatic solutions, what could realistically be installed. And it doesn't have to be significant investment. It could be small tweaks to what's already out there. So if there's already a shared path out there and it connects to another shared path, but currently there's no wayfinding, or currently you don't know which of those shared path legs has priority, so you want to install some give way signs. That is a big tick. You have better improved safety for cyclists just with that simple choice there. Just got a question in the chat there. Can I do a pop-up cycleway? Yes, please. That'd be fantastic. We'd love to see a pop-up cycleway. No issues there. Does cycling infrastructure include a footpath and pram ramps or specific cycle infrastructure like bike lane or shared path? So it would be anywhere that a cyclist is legally allowed to ride. So if the footpath and pram ramp is able to accommodate legally, like it's given a shared path status, then cyclists are allowed to ride there. Then yes, you can use that as an example. But if it's just a footpath and cyclists happen to use it, probably don't do that for your assignment, just because it'd be better to focus on things that, oh yeah, footpaths in Western Australia can be ridden. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, same with Tas. You can ride on the footpath in Tas, so that makes more sense. But yeah, anywhere that there is a legal ability for cyclists to ride there, then yeah, you can use that as an example. The final step is saving and uploading this document, as well as however you've formatted your response to the LMS. This document, all you need to do is your name and the location of your sites in Google Maps. And the reason we want that is just so Ken and I as assessors, we can have a quick look around, we can see if you've picked up on all the pertinent hazards and what you're suggesting to better improve safety for cyclists would actually be feasible in that location. So just helps us as assessors, take note of exactly what's going on there. But encourage any final questions. I do have one last little bit of information to show everyone. At the end of the LMS module, you'll see that there's this section saying feedback and certificate. In order to achieve your the certificate, you'll see this is not available unless you've got your required score in module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4. So basically we've assessed everything and you've got above that 80% mark. If all of that gets a tick, you also need to complete our cycling infrastructure course feedback form. And the reason we do this is because, like Ken and I, we love teaching this. This is just an awesome thing to be able to spread this information. And we love getting everyone in this environment and hearing exactly how they do things and what they view as risks. But if there are particular topics that we've missed, things we haven't spent enough time on or too much time on, etc., this is an opportunity for you to give us the feedback to make this course even stronger going forward, so that the next round can be more encompassing. So we have that as part of the requirement to achieve your certificate. Once all of those items have been complete, you'll get an email with your certificate, and we'll also post you one in the mail, a hard copy, as well as any of the prizes that you may have won over the last 2 weeks from all the comments and all the trivia. So don't worry, Ken's been taking note of everyone that's been contributing. So it looks like there is a question there, but from Cheston, does the facility need to be some length of a cycleway or specific place like an intersection? Once again, it works either way. You can focus on just one intersection, or you can focus on a link, as long as you've got adequate discussion points. Either or is fine. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Max. One last thing we did, people were really loving the 360-degree footage. So we put together this little page of, we've got lots of 360, we just ride around filming stuff and then editing it. So we've got this page of different facilities, 360-degree footage through them. And we went through and gave little emojis to what we thought about them. So you might be able to, if you're thinking about different facilities or treatments, be able to have a look at some of those and get some ideas, or what doesn't work or what does work. So we'll pop that in there as a resource for you into the resource documents. But I think for our last minute, I'd just like to say thanks to Max for all his work behind the scenes. He is super passionate about this course and just really just loves getting the info and having people get together and chat about this. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their super busy schedules to do this. We just hope there's stuff in here that you're able to get out there and put on the ground in your designs and the work you're doing. So thank you so much for taking time to do this. Yeah, get that assignment done and have a bit of fun with it. We think it's a great little way to finish off the course. Of course, Max and I are always available to answer questions as you're going. Happy to flick you different bits and pieces of work we know of, or give you contacts in other areas. So thank you very much. Safe cycling.
Fantastic. And yes, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help with assignment 4 or just any queries about cycling infrastructure. It's been fantastic. And yes, it's been wonderful having you all. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
See you again. Bye.